Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Predating. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Predating on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hey everybody, it is your good friend the Safety Doc from down here in the North Star recording studio. It was a -5 Fahrenheit this morning, so yeah, a cold one out there, so I put it out on Twitter. It was colder overnight. I think it gets up to maybe like 8, 10 today, and then cold tomorrow, cold the weekend, then it warms up again, I guess, into the 30s. Usually like February here in Wisconsin is pretty cold, but once you get past February, March kind of levels out. So the studio is icy today, and I have on a fleece over a thermal shirt. So I'm doing all right down here. I've got the electric fireplace off right now, so things are okay. But otherwise, a few updates. One is that Monday we had a terrific show here on the Safety Doc with guest Jonathan Berger, and we were talking about how truckers are getting hosed, right, over not only the pandemic, but just in general. And I think it's even more relevant. We weren't specifically talking about the trucking convoy up in Canada, but it's relevant too. A few things from that show again, and the podcast blog on Safety PhD is really good. There are points in there. I mean, I didn't know about trucking. Like, what is a lumper, for example? So the lumper, move the mic out a little bit here. So lumper, it's MK Joe. Hey, MK Joe. The lumper is the person who moves the freight out of the truck or into the truck. And oftentimes that would be the job of the truck driver, or it would be an option that they could do that. And that could be anywhere from like, $200 to $300, depending upon the load. So if you do that 3 times a week, right, about $1,000. So when the pandemic started, they were telling truckers, hey, stay in your truck, stay in the cab. And so they would then have their own lumpers, like doing the freight. So the truck drivers were losing out like on $1,000 a week for the most part. And that continues in a lot of locations. And then the whole craziness of there aren't enough parking spots for truck drivers. They can only drive 11 hours. They have this electronic monitoring device on their vehicles, and they have to take a break or take a rest for like 8 hours and stuff like that. So as he said, these truck stops, waysides, things like that, there aren't enough spots. You get tickets. And I was looking over the infrastructure bill, nothing in there to include more spots for truckers. This has been a problem for years, and it's only going to get worse. But just crazy. So I see falling in here, we have Vanessa, we have John Rice, Toy Town. So let me do, here we go. MK Joe, welcome. Good morning, John Rice. Good morning, Vanessa. Vanessa, -5 here this morning. So I put it out on my Twitter, a little screenshot of the weather, of the temp, right? Thermometer is what it's called. A little late. Good morning. No, actually right on time. I had to delay this to 9:15 because I needed to reboot the mic again, which now is having me more concerned that the mic is something's not quite right here. I'm sure it sounds okay now, but because I've got my leveler on the side, I can see where things are at. But I do have a Zoom, but I would have to configure it a little bit differently, but it is a far superior microphone, and I'm not sure how, again, I would interface it and get it into the computer, but it's something I can figure out. And I bought it new like 4 or 5 years ago, like brand new. Worked great. I was doing more things out kind of in the community. I used it for consulting. When I would interview people, like I'd bring out the Zoom to have a great recording. But right now, I haven't used it actually for a couple of years, and I think it would be a great option. If I did it, I think it would also free up some space here, because like right underneath the microphone is the keyboard. So, and because I typically look at the keyboard when I'm typing, things kind of get crazy here. But Vanessa saying new predictions are 2+ feet of snow where she's at. So through Saturday. Wow. well, be careful, get your supplies, and hopefully the power stays on. And um, I'll tell you, I'm a little bit envious of a big snowstorm because we haven't had one here for maybe like 3 years. And then I get to fire up the snowblower and things like that. So, but yeah, nothing in the works for us. It's cold enough here. I mean, again, with being -5 and having cold streaks, but they haven't opened the snowmobile trails, just not enough snow. Zippy said, I saw I lurk. Oh my goodness, Zippy. DJ, Zooms are good for remote recording. Yeah, I use my Zoom on a couple remote presentations I did when I was consulting, where I'd be like out on scene and I wanted to record it. So I had this like 20-foot cable that ran to my camcorder, and those worked really well. The camcorder kind of sucked. I don't know what I should do with that. I mean, I rarely use it, and it's just not that good. Even though it's like a Sony or Canon or something, it's old and it's not that great. But so yeah. Carl's saying sort of like, if your kids in public school, they aren't learning, they're being programmed. Get them out. Wow. Yeah, a lot of that going around. We're going to talk today on one of our Face Validity articles about schools. So hang in there, Carl, and it's up close on deck here. Hello, Vanessa. I'm not sure who this is, but subscribe to the channel. It just shows three little. I'm sure there are three icons there that I can't see over here in my StreamYard. Old days playing 2-track cassette seems ages. Yeah, I still have in back of me is a cassette player back there with a CD on the top. I bought that at Best Buy when I was in college. So I would say I bought that as a remote to it also. Works great. It's just I don't use it much down here. It's basically like new condition, but I bought that in probably 1993, I would guess. So yeah, I think that's about 30 years 30 years old. Again, low humidity. I feel fine. Humidity is lower down here than it is upstairs. So when I come down here instantly, I can just sense it takes the time to adjust to the humidity. So it's multi-climate here at my house. So you're old. DJ, I don't know, you and I probably would have a pretty good running for that because I'm no spring chicken over here, but yeah, my I have a cassette player back there and so, but couple things. Yeah, that was a great show Monday night, and I might do like a follow-up interview somebody else on trucking just because it was so good, just to bring in another perspective. And then I had been working with Jonathan Berger, who I interviewed, and I said, let's come up with this thing of like, if there was a brown bag, there's like a brown grocery bag, and there's a campaign called Brown Bag Boost for Truckers. Okay, let's make this up. But what would be things as a trucker? And then these bags would be given to truckers at waysides or as they were coming into towns or stuff like this, like as an appreciation, right? What should be in that bag? So we were thinking kind of back and forth and came up with a list of items in that bag. And one was really interesting because he said people could 3D print these diffusers, which can attach to vents, and then like you can aim more of the cold air or hot air towards you when you're trucking. So like, you could get that out to the 3D community, and plastic utensils, socks. I mean, so we had this, what would go in this bag. And plus he said, like somebody writing a card, right? Who knows? But I'm like this, it should be an actual campaign. So I'm like, there's a framework for that, but I still believe this needs, so I'm going to be thinking about it more, and, organizations, people I connect up with and think this out a little bit more, because I think there's something really, really to this. It's late. I mean, it's like saying, thank you way after the fact, but I still think it's warranted. So let me bring up my first article today, and this isn't one of my 4, but this is one that was released yesterday, and it just has me so I don't know if upset's the word. I wouldn't say angry is the word, but this one just really irks me. So let me bring this one up here. Uh, from a face validity standpoint, this one is a terrific example. So right here, everybody, right here it is. Mayor Pete, or now Transportation Pete, or Pete. Um, by the way, before we get into this, so DJ Play Nice was saying, and why not include a handwritten note, maybe even a score postcard for them to use nice. Yeah, and have them stamped, right? Already have a few stamps on them. That's one of the things I was thinking too. And schools were writing letters to hometown heroes, or you could have places where people could do these, and I mean, just even a few sentences, right? There's so many things, and you could have some wild card things that could be in there, like knit a hat or a muffler or something like that. So yeah, this brown bag, let's go, this brown bag brigade, that is a better title than brown bag boost. Makes sense. And when we got into that show, one of the things, waysides were shut down and everything, I found an article from Arizona where the county, not the county, the state opened up 2 waysides that have been closed down. So they shuttered waysides and they allowed truckers to be there and stay, but then they only staffed it for a few hours a day. So you didn't have showers, you didn't have other stuff. Just crazy. Oh my God, I'll have to go back to this one. You guys are just hitting it out of the park here. How about a list of folks that are willing to offer a trucker a real home? I agree. No, I agree. These are all, these are things that should have come up back in March and April of 2020. Back when my news station, my major media here, they were covering, here's people at home getting, groups together to knit mask or to sew mask and stuff like that. And it was all focused on that, which I get. But then how about this, right? How about, truck drivers are told, you drive without a brake and, longer routes, more freight, and you're not getting any hazard pay, by the way. You're not getting any bonus from the government. You're losing your lumper pay. You have to stay in your cab. You can't socialize, right? You can't even go into buildings. It was just insane. So where was this initiative coming out of Mayor Pete, right, from the transportation department? No, excuse me, it wasn't Mayor Pete at that time. I got to take that back. But from the transportation department, right, or deployment of National Guard, or even state stepping up to do this. Arizona tried to do something, but I'm not even saying this should have been a federal thing. It should have been a state thing, or even kind of a county or local thing. But it just is so crazy that this stuff gets missed. I get so irritated about that. Give truck drivers a disposable camera, ask them to take pictures of the best and worst of their experience. Yeah, do they still have those right now? Or even if there were pictures that they could take and upload to a certain site, right? So I look at gun websites, and how about recording a list of interesting questions they could use, answer questions, let truckers be available to folks understand their drivers. Yeah, again, where was media? Where was Vice? Not that I'm a big Vice fan, but or local media, or talking to truckers, right? And saying, hey, what are you experiencing? Because we had a ton of that with nursing. We had none of it with trucking. So it's an issue. The more I learn about it, I'm more passionate about this, more fired up. And this whole brown bag brigade, I think deserves some attention. So I'm thinking about that and thinking, yeah, what that might look like. Another thing we talked about too is why not open county fairgrounds in the spring of 2020, right? Because fairgrounds aren't being used in the spring typically, but why not open county fairgrounds for 10 weeks? Okay, for maybe just 10 weeks. And so people could bring things down there, and maybe then the brown bag stuff is given out there. People could bring, drop off meals, and I understand the whole social distancing thing, but you could have at least then had some showers or some centralized food and distribution of goods, and people wouldn't have got tickets. we were fining, as a society, we were fining truck drivers $200 a day for parking where they shouldn't be during the pandemic, when most of their parking spots were closed down, right? They were getting tickets at $200 a day. Um, and so, yeah, it was insane. I want to do an article on this for Crisis Response Journal, and I think I've got the pieces together. I kind of want to figure out how to frame it. This would have been interesting for my book, but it didn't specifically fit in the book. It's great. It just didn't match the content of the book, of the velocity of information. But I did talk about essential versus non-essential. I did mention truckers, but I kind of used a juxtaposition of comparing um, nurses and police officers, right? Because we were expected to do parades for nurses as a society, which and then police officers put those on, even though their numbers were drastically thinned out by the pandemic. But there wasn't a parade for police, right? Um, so interesting stuff. But I'm not done here with how I want to approach this with truckers. And as some of you know, I'm running for political office in my city here. An interstate goes right past my city, right, on the edge of it. And that's another consideration. Like, what should or what could the city have done? Sure, there were a lot of needs and a lot of concerns for the city, but um, I think there was a real missed opportunity here. So I don't think that. I know that. So, well, thanks. I mean, these are great. Like, I'm going to go back and take notes out of what you've posted. Gun websites, DJ Play Nice, and Vanessa, and everybody. Thank you. So let's go back to Mayor Pete. Again, I still call him Mayor Pete, but so yesterday. So here's someone who's been completely absent during the supply chain, outside of a trip to California to say, oh yeah, this is what it looks like. This is abysmal. It's absolutely horrible. And so this comes out yesterday. Buttigieg announced a strategy to turn tide of U.S. traffic deaths. So actually, I looked at traffic death data, and it's in my book, because traffic death data went up after the pandemic. Well, I shouldn't say, because I guess we're still in the pandemic, but and so the numbers dropped and the numbers came back, and they're kind of on a trend line. They are higher than what normally they would be projected. So part of that, I would say, a big part of that is people didn't drive for quite a while, and driving takes practice, right? So if suddenly you're driving less and you start driving again, you'd expect there would be some curve where there might be more accidents. But 1 year's worth of data from a researcher here doesn't really tell you a lot. So anyway, but let's go into this. So this is by Byron Hurd of Autoblog, and this is irritating to me. So Buttigieg announced a strategy to turn tide of U.S. traffic deaths. So you go through this, and basically there's a few studies that link out in here. So, but let me point out a few things here. Let me get this larger. This is where. So they've been working on this right now. Like, apparently his administration, whatever that is, this is what they've been focusing on while the supply chain has fallen apart and truckers can't come into the U.S. And he's not helping truck drivers, right? He's not doing the brown bag brigade, but this is apparently where Pete's at. So he said there's 6 principles to this whole plan for decreasing deaths. So about 40,000 deaths a year and more injuries on roads in America. So first thing here, death and serious injury is unacceptable. So that's a straw man argument. Well, first of all, I guess I'd never analyzed the title very well. So let's look at the title first. Buttigieg announced his strategy to turn tide on U.S. traffic deaths. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. So again, from a trend line, looking at the actual numbers, this is like a 1 or 2 year anomaly. Yeah, traffic deaths are about 40,000 a year, which is a huge number, but that's also pretty steady. And I get, you'd have to look at how many miles people drive and commutes. And um, anyway, um, it sounds like this is like really, big ramping up issue. And looking at this from face validity, I'm like, I just bought a vehicle a couple months ago. It has 11 airbags and sensors in the front and the back and, all of this stuff. Like, it is significantly more advanced than the 14-year-old vehicle that it replaced. Technology wise, a lot of the vehicles will become safer. I mean, look at the crash Tiger Woods had, and, the vehicle, basically prevented him from life threatening injuries. So, there is a part of this where I think it's technology is going to mitigate some of this. But anyway, and this is a weird way, like as the infrastructure person like Pete, to also come in and to say, I got to turn the heat on. There we go. To come in and to say, this is, so it's like you didn't get the infrastructure bill. So this is how you also kind of need to point out how infrastructure is bad, and so we need money for this plus cars. It's a different approach. Death is serious is unacceptable. Anytime anybody writes that is a straw man argument, right? It's like these signs that come up in my neighborhood and it says, our farmers are essential. Well, of course they are. Like, that is no one's arguing that. So this is a statement that how are you going to argue against this? Like, death and serious injury is unacceptable from crashes. Well, you want to work that down, but there are. I had the number. There were a fair number of people who die slipping on floors in a year, right? So I talked to a guy that's like his focus, his main area, and he does insurance and stuff in that area. So this whole thing, death serious, so you get a straw man argument. If anybody argues against it, you can quickly make them out to be the bad guy. This number 2, humans make mistakes. So of course they do. With this, with handling a knife to cut up their food. Right, running a lawnmower. You can go with anything. There's no need to make this statement unless you're basically saying, oh, we're going to move humans to the side of the equation here for driving. So again, looking at this face validity, humans are vulnerable. People have limits for tolerating crash forces. So basically, if you, right, the more serious the crash, the more injury. It's kind of a stupid statement, right? Like these, but anyway, responsibility is shared. All stakeholders, transportation systems, users, managers, vehicle manufacturers must ensure that crashes don't lead to fail. But they do that now, right? They have crash tests. Vehicles are significantly safer. I was watching videos where they were crashing vehicles, like from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, all the way through today. And just like they are significantly safer in the cabin area, significantly safer. So that's objective. But of course, this is kind of shouldering, we're all going to be in this together to make cars that drive 3 miles an hour and have 10 inches of foam around them. But that's not really the goal here. Safety is proactive. Don't state the obvious. That's a weak argument. Redundancy is crucial. Yeah, you've got seatbelts, airbags. There's foam. There's styrofoam inside of the bumpers, condensed in all of the vehicles, like impact foam. But so anyway, so as I'm going through this really irks me. I really get pissed about this. Because first of all, basically what you're trying to do here from face validity is you're trying to say, let's automate cars, right? Let's get to the safety systems where they get to the point where they're automated. So we'll mandate this stuff in for everybody, like every vehicle, whether it's the very entry cheap level vehicle, or if it's a truck that's just going to be used on a farm or whatever. Everything will have all of these safety measures, which aren't proven to make a vehicle safer, by the way, over time. Like, we just don't have this longitudinal studies saying, lane departure and stuff. I'm saying maybe it does, and it probably does, but we don't have this information. And anyway, vehicles are going in this direction, Pete, right? Like the vehicles are being made safer. So the question I would have, Pete, is how about the roads? How about the highways and funding and roads and design for roads, right? How about we maybe look at that instead of basically telling people drive less and you're going to have your vehicle automated. And so this whole face validity is really, I read the study. There's a study here. Well, it's linked in here somewhere, but so I read the study, and it's largely saying, well, if we had automated vehicles, we wouldn't have these problems, and that's where we need to be working toward. So this sucks. Like this, and so here again is the face validity. Let's take this in context. What is happening right now as you observe outside? Are you observing a higher number of car crashes? Are people like contacting you and telling you about this? Not to downplay that because they're horrible, right? No, but what you're observing is a collapse of the supply chain, which he's in charge of. So instead of doing his job, he's now taking on this other ancillary project, which is down the road and futuristic. And by the time he's not doing this job anymore and collecting a pension, someone else will be dealing with it, or it'll just be forgotten. So I worked with people like this. I worked with these great deflectors, and this is what they would do is they'd be like, oh, like what's happening in my job right now or what I'm responsible for is really difficult. So instead of doing that, I'm going to take on this other thing, which isn't relevant at the time. And I'm going to make it everything that I do. It's going to consume me. It's going to consume all my meetings, all my press conferences, and all of that. And that's exactly what he's doing. So from a face validity standpoint, this is a man hiding from the reality of what's happening around him. He should be out. He should be talking with the truckers. He should be starting the brown bag brigade, or at least, getting out there and partnering with a Lions Club, right, Vanessa? Right, a Lions Club or something like that to do this somewhere and to pilot it and to show it and things like this. But instead, which is huge, right? And these issues with the truckers at the borders and I mean, just the entire supply stuff, absolutely a mess. You got to step up and lead that. That's your job. But no, this is what I'm doing. This is what we've been putting time into, right? So now it's we're going to take on this multi-year initiative again, which will either fall apart when you're gone, or it's never going to come to fruition, or it would just naturally cross in lines, right? Like meaning the cars and things are going to get to this point anyway. And this is also kind of hinting at, we don't want you to own a vehicle down the road. We want you to subscribe to one. And there's just a lot of wacky stuff. But, it's one of these things on a natural trend line, which is just going to get better. It's like saying we need better battery life for cell phones and stuff like that. We need more reliable. Well, great. And the fact is that'll probably just happen, right? Technology advances, things use less energy. It'll be there. And then you can look like a champion for like saying something that was obviously predictable. So anyway, I'm going to bring this up one more time. This is appalling. This is disgusting. Pete, do your job if you know how to do it, or bring in people that can help you. And you don't do this right now. By God, everybody knows that the supply chain is a wreck right now. Get in there and do the hard work to get it to at least try to contribute to make it better, instead of saying, I don't want to do this. Again, I worked with so many people that did this, and I don't know, maybe there's a term for it. Carl, you could come up with it, Tara. And they would just say, wow, this is big. It kind of scares me. This is overwhelming. So let me do another initiative, which is pretty obvious, and it's going to be slow moving. And I can do these straw man arguments, such as right here. My straw man argument: death and serious injury is unacceptable. Ooh, that's right. Who's going to argue against that? Humans make mistakes. Who's going to argue against that? Although, but and yet, like, they cut driver's ed from school. For example, they make truck drivers right now drive, or not make, but they allow them to drive the longer hours without the 30-minute breaks, and reducing licenses. People who come to the country are given licenses to drive without going through formal license. programs. So it just really disgusts me. I'm really mad about that. So again, do your job. Don't come off on this car stuff. Get down, and every day for you now should be supply chain. Every day. So, by the way, Pete, how's our stock market doing today? So, it's down a brisk 273 for the Dow. So, yikes, which is a little icy. So, I don't know. God. All right, let's go to the chat and we'll get back. This is, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Let's get the banner going here for everybody. All right, please subscribe. Here's the our talk at the start too. So this is the most honest book written about the $3 billion school safety industry, School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America, by me. So if you are a parent, if you're a teacher, if you know a teacher, parent, if you're a taxpayer, like, where's my money going for school safety, or things like pandemic safety, right? Because you can kind of figure out how schools make their decisions on safety things. It's in this book. You can get it on places sell books. It's hard copy. This is my original copy 3 years ago. Really relevant. A lot of stories in there. New York City, how 500,000 people were evacuated in 9 hours from Lower Manhattan during the Twin Towers attacks. So there's things in there about how that happened, which no one's talking about, right? The psychology side of it. A lot of interviews. It's a great book. Again, School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America. If you haven't read it, please read it. If you've read it, please review it. I appreciate that. And back to our chat. So Carl's saying, let's make SAT easier because owning standards help everyone slam side. Yep. It's one of our stories. So yeah. Oh my goodness. So DJ, we are original brown bag brigade. We can do this. I'm really into this. So again, after Monday, I've been thinking more about this. So from my own, like, how I'm thinking about this. I really am. I need to figure out who to partner with, right? Who to do this, who to get the word out there, how to pilot it, what this might look like. But yeah. And hey, Terrace Kitchen, welcome. And DJ, please, Jim, battery cars are, yeah, no kidding, right? Especially if it's -5 outside where I'm at right now. I don't know. And full of solid concepts. So Pete's qualifications for DOT was overseeing a new sidewalk. Oh my God, all pro Lementon. I saw one of Nick Johnson's videos. So you're probably familiar with Nick going, showing cities in America. He would do South Bend. And he was like, "Oh my God, this is this is a rough place and bad infrastructure." And it's like, Pete, came from there. So anyway, I guess I look at this and I'm like, Pete, what in the world are you doing right now? Right? I mean, when it's obvious that supply chain issues and getting down with truckers and ports and transportation and trains and logistics, like trying to figure out all of it, and then how maybe the Fed can contribute to that. Maybe are there staging areas? Are there other assets in a short time that can, I don't know. I feel like I would do a much better job at this than Pete, but nobody called me. Tara knows who runs I-180 from Omaha to Pennsylvania. Engine drives generator drives motor, just a diesel electric chain. Yep. Jim McIntosh driving on the New Jersey Turnpike, stopping at the Woodrow Wilson rest area, 9 charging stations and 40 feet away. Listen to diesel generators supplying. That's crazy, isn't it? Right. So I've seen videos of that where they'll have these charging stations, but then there are generators that are operating gas powered generators to operate the electric. It's just shake your head at it. Just crazy. Hey, it's Wiz Learning. My goodness, I got a term for it. Ducking responsibility. Yeah, that's it. So there's a second part to it, right? So it's ducking responsibility, and then you make yourself look busy with some massive initiative, which is completely irrelevant, and which technology natural technology progression will probably solve, right? So, like, um, so yeah. So again, I worked with somebody who was a whiz at this. Like things would get busy or whatever, and then this person would come up with these immediate pseudo initiatives, which had no relevancy in the moment. So stop screwing with the supply chain. Things will get better. This is by design. So kind of, yeah. But right, if you're Pete, wouldn't you want to at least convey as an image that you were much more involved with the supply chain, studying it, right? PR, like having pictures with truckers, with trains, and trains, planes, automobiles, all this stuff. But it just is really weird imaging. It just is so unprofessional. So, Toy Town said, I call it redundant progressive posturing paper tiger. No kidding, buddy. That's a good one. Vanessa, it's always illegal to walk. It's already illegal to walk along the interstate, but they generally hold you overnight and take you to the county line after a walk from Oregon to Lake Charles. Wow. Yikes. Sast, one too many. Welcome. Greetings, everyone. Got Aaron's dropped by to say hi. Aaron Sast drives very fast, so hopefully it's not icy out there. Take care, buddy. Zippy, I love the logic. People cannot drive at will. It will cost so much to raise the skills needed to drive, so let's force people to buy insurance. Yep. And I think there's this whole thing that's missing from Pete's article, right? Or Pete's big thing. And that's like, there's an entropy to driving. If you haven't driven for a while, I think this is studied by people out on in the Navy, right? So if you've been out at deployment for several months and you come back like that, it's difficult, not difficult, but it takes a while to relearn how to drive your vehicle and the rules of the road and stuff. Not that you forget it, right? But if you do it every day versus like you haven't done it for 100 days, there's an adjustment. So I think that's going on with people. But instead of doing that, no, Pete wants to, God, it's crazy. So let's get to our first story here. And this one is from the Washington Times. And let's bring it up here. This is from Hot News Topics. So we'll figure out who did this in just a second. But the title is Teachers Union Partners with News Rating Service NewsGuard. Partners. So this is a key word in this title for face validity, partners. So when you partner with somebody, especially here, your teachers union organization, so it kind of means like you're each bringing the same amount or similar amounts into this, right? You're partnering. But what's actually happening is the teachers union isn't partnering with News Rating Service. They're hiring them. They're a client of them, which is different. So yes, some very selective wording here. This one is by Ryan Lovelace of the Washington Times, Tuesday, January 25th. So here's American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten. This is another example of you've got big issues in front of you, just like Pete, and you decide to do something else. So this is exactly what this is. So let me read it. Let's try to get it bigger on the screen here. Okay, here we go. The American Federation of Teachers wants its educators to play a bigger role in sorting fact from fiction in the news that students see online. The union on Tuesday said it's partnering with NewsGuard, a digital tool ranking news sources to make its ratings widely available to AFT's 1.7 million members and tens of millions of students they serve. Through a new licensing agreement, NewsGuard school teachers will have free license to its traffic light news ratings and nutrition label reviews. AFT President Randy Garden said the effort is part of a work focused on middle school, high school, and post-secondary students. Okay, so face validity, you're partnering with a news rating service as a teachers union to help kids get more accurate information. All right. Anybody else see the face validity problems with this? So one is you're not partnering, you are hiring. Looking at NewsGuard, right? That is subjective with NewsGuard. They are making decisions in their algorithms. So they are subjectively determining what will be deemed credible and what won't. Okay. This is schools where we teach kids how hopefully in a but how to gather and evaluate information. It's kind of like an admiralty scale or a NATO scale. How valued is your source, how accurate is your source, and then your information. It's actually really, if you bring up admiralty scale, it's very, very easy. You can teach it to kids. You can put it on a note card. I wrote about it in the philosophy of information. So this is saying to kids, you're not going to be able to learn this, right? Here's the face validity message. You're not going to be able to learn what's real, what's not real. So we're going to off-source it into this company, and then they will tell you. Like for nutrition, no kid will care about that. Let's be honest. As they're holding their big gulp from 7-Eleven or this coffee. By the way, if you haven't subscribed, it is the pinned comment for my channel. I appreciate it. I'm going to get up to 1.2 thousand soon. I'm like 1,185 or something like that. So it's pretty cool. And the watch hours have been going up, so appreciate that. So, this is crazy. This is nuts because we want to teach. So what they should do is maybe put the money instead into a program or a process. So this is all virtue signaling, obviously, but I was saying here are ways we're going to teach debate, or we're going to sponsor some debate grants for schools, or a national debate competition for middle school and high school, or a state level competition for debates. So you're teaching how to assess information and then how to argue it, how to find the factual basis of it. But no, we're going to off-source it. We're going to cognitively offload it, which is what this term is, cognitive offloading. We're going to offload it to a program, and the program will tell you whether to trust this or not. So there's bias obviously built into these programs. And there's another part. So, I teach legal issues courses at the university. I teach one right now. And this is a Board of Education decision. This is an American Federation of Teachers. Like if this was coming in to my district, and I was the Board of Education or superintendent, I'd be like, wait a minute, if we're going to, pass this on to parents, or is this going to be used at home or school? We have the right to select methodology. This is us. This isn't the AFT, or because now their members have this, that they would pass this forward into students. That clearly violates the right to select methodology. So I actually wrote an article about that. It's out there somewhere. I think in my Google Scholar, you can find it. But so this is overreaching. But what it is, right, is it's trying to portray the American Federation of Teachers as being this, we are going to tell you what you can trust and what you can't trust. So this whole, crazy bias. What should they be doing right now? Right. Again, face validity. We've talked about it before, like Mayor Pete. This is a dodge. We should be getting kids, right, helping kids get back to school, helping to, I guess, advocate for resources for school, maybe mental health funding and things like this. But no, instead of this, we are going to pair up with this company, NewsGuard, which you can research and figure out your own conclusions on that. And then we want teachers and kids to be able to use this so kids know if they can trust information. It's garbage. It's complete garbage. It's disgusting. So it's basically, right. We need to teach kids, which I do in my book, right? And face validity in adults. What are indicators? What's face validity? Like today, what's face validity? Weighing information, observing, talking to others, that whole thermometer thing. If the thermometer reads 88 degrees and it's right outside dock here, it's -5 and everything's covered in ice and it's kind of snowy. Well, then the thermometer is broken and your senses are failing you. So it's from face validity. This doesn't cut it. Doesn't cut it at all. Let's go to our next one here. This is from the Georgia Star, and the Georgia Star. So right here, look at this. That's their logo. They're like, hey, we're the Georgia Star. So like they came together and like, what should we do for a logo? Like, why don't we do a big G and a yellow star, and they'll put Georgia Star News underneath. They're like, it's great. Here's your $45,000. This one is online. SAT will be short and easier. Zippy, I think you wrote about this. When I get done with this one, I'll come back to the chat. Thank you so much for posting. Thanks for the 16 thumbs up. January 26, 2022 from Georgia Staff News. From a couple things. Face validity. Let's go to the title. The online SAT will be shorter, subjective rate measure, easier subjective. Easier is a subjective term, so I don't like that in a heading. Georgia Star news staff. Anytime anything is done by a news staff and not a person in the byline, it means it's probably going to pull together things from other sources, and they haven't done their own research on this. They're just kind of pulling together to fill space for an article. So knowing that, that's kind of going to be our expectation here. Is they're probably going to be pulling from other sites on this instead of like doing their own. Oh no, it is. It's actually by Kendall Teets. So that's kind of weird. So it's by Georgia Staff, but then it's by Kendall Teets. So, all right. So wow. Anyway, so let's go through this. A common college admissions test, SAT, which I never had to take. I just took the ACT, will roll out its online version in the U.S. starting in March 2024. The Wall Street Journal reported the new test is reportedly expected to be easier, shorter, and simpler. Tests were reduced from 3 hours to 4, shorter reading passages followed by single questions, while math problems will be less wordy with calculators permitted for every question, according to Priscilla Rodriguez, Vice President of College Assessments for College Board. So anyway, let's keep going here. The shift to online testing will start internationally in March 2023, but the PSAT also says to go digital will remain exclusively at schools and testing sites. Test score will be returned within days. What I couldn't figure out here was, I didn't quite get the proctoring part of this. So, yeah. And here's one thing. So like it says, it doesn't test your attention span the same way. You definitely don't feel as strained. What I would tell you is what I would tell other students is that you don't have to practice reading the same way. Okay, Kristen Wang, a junior at a high school, reported that out. So, all right, let's talk about this. So, SAT shorter and easier from face validity. Moving it online probably made sense. I think when I don't know if I took an ACT, I took it some kind of like maybe for my doctoral program, and it was online, but I was at the university and there was a proctor there. So, I mean, that was okay. I mean, I can understand where that kind of makes sense. I wouldn't think taking this at home or in a non-proctored environment would be a good idea. Will it be shorter? So the thing is, if you do, the reason you have a longer test, right, is because it's called to your construct. So you have different areas you're trying to measure. And so now instead of asking like 4 questions in that area, and maybe, you get 3 out of 4 right, or 4 out of 4, whatever, they're going to ask maybe 1, 2, 3 questions. So then if you miss it, you're really cooked. So this whole thing of going from 3 hours to 2, one of the issues with that is you, in a larger sample, and this whole thing of like, oh, it's like too long to study and too fatigued. Well, come on. Like, everybody studies for this. I mean, this is not meant to be easy. Like this is meant to identify, maybe career paths and things like that, and whatever. But when you shorten things up from a face validity standpoint, you don't have as big a sample. And if you make any errors in that, they're going to be magnified. So your score could significantly drop on this by a couple mistakes, where if it was a longer version, that wouldn't have, right? So that's all in here. And this whole thing of ease here, I just think that's I wouldn't, again, and I wouldn't pair that up with a testing thing. You want tests to have rigor. Like, you don't want tests to be fun and enjoyable and all of this. That's not the design. They're trying to design this to be appealing and catchy, to stick up, stay with the ACT, and so schools don't dump it because kids are like, we don't want to take this. And the reality is, this is all going by the wayside anyway. So, like, these, SAT, those things aren't going to be required before long. They'll just be worked out of schools. I would say within 3-4 years. So I think they're trying to stay relevant here by saying, hey, we're going to make this shorter and easier. But the question then is the constructs, or what you're trying to measure by this test. Now you've just decreased your inputs for that, or your sample. So again, imagine like this. Imagine an NFL football season, and instead of playing 17 games this year, you play, 11 games, right? Or 12 games. And now that is your season. So, well, for some people that works out really well and things like that. But, let's go back, like 12 games into the season, the Rams probably wouldn't be playing in the NFC Championship, or the 49ers, and so, I mean, it's these things where, I don't know, the whole thing with easier, I don't like, but, so face validity, they're doing it to stay relevant. They're going to go by the wayside anyway. So see you later, SAT. So here's our third one. But before we get to it, let's go to the chat. So let me catch up here a little bit. Zippy wrote, same logic that lowering test standards because they cannot make education cheaper and more widespread. You're right. No, you're absolutely right, Zippy. You can either do two things. And I had a friend of mine when I was teaching who was a pharmacist who told me this, and it sticks with me to this day. And she said, when things got more difficult to recruit in pharmacy, so we had this discussion back, like, I don't know, in the 90s. And she said they increased pay. So now, they're drawing people into the field with more pay. But in education, where I was at, we were, I guess, either lowering the standards, right? And we weren't increasing pay to get people in. So it's this whole thing. I don't know, same logic that lowering test scores because they cannot make. Actually, Zippy, I probably didn't do a good job of answering that one for you, but yeah, this is. So again, you're going to get to the point with the SAT and ACT and a lot of these exams where they're going to be useless. They're not going to be a entry measurement criteria. A lot of that was done. Actually, I wrote about it in my book, The Velocity of Information. World War II, the screening out process was, really ineffective. So they were initially screening out like 12 to 16% of people for a likelihood of psychological collapse, not being able to, I guess, quote unquote, as World War II, like tough it out during the war. And then they realized that was an incorrect approach of how they were going toward this. But so this is from Carl. DJ Plainess used to drive up and down the New Jersey Turnpike. Not much anymore, just local. So, yeah, me too. I drive a lot. Pete couldn't get the potholes fixed in South Bend Transsectory was far Panoscope. TPC Cooks, yeah, thanks. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. It's a pinned comment. No kidding. I mean, and I guess you don't have to come from this like place you've fixed. But in what I obtained in my research in South Bend during Pete's tenure there is it did not get better. and infrastructure did not get better. It diminished. Again, just go to the Nick Johnson videos and his interviews with people over time when Pete was there to substantiate some of that. But I'm saying it just in the position he's in now, do your job, like do what is obviously in front of you. I mean, it is, it's like going to a fire with a fire truck, right? And, the building's on fire in front of you. Instead of like putting the buildings out, you're like, the weeds are pretty high here along the road. So like, and it's harder to see like the fire extinguishers and just other things and stuff. So we really should cut the weeds back. Like it should be a campaign, like along the roads, everything should be cut back 20 feet. It's like, yeah, maybe, but there's a house on fire right there and you have a fire truck. So do something. So Tara Smith's Kitchen wrote, have you seen the automated trucks? They've been around for years, but more companies are trying them. One has been hauling beer for a decade, Colorado. No, Google has a few trucks. Yeah, I've been learning about that those are out there. And I don't think I know University of Madison, where I went to school, that little automated carts that would drive around and deliver food on campus. They didn't work well in winter, by the way, but otherwise. And, I think we will get to a point where drones will be delivering some things on a regular basis. So again, and this is good. So as I'm not trying to say like, I want drones, I want the stuff to replace truckers and stuff like that. But I'm saying again, where Pete goes and all these initiatives and all of these things, a number of these things are going to be, things will become safer through these processes, which are already happening. So, hey, it's Phil Henry, our good friend from Germany. He said a Safety Doc episode on the Great Resignation is long overdue. So, I'd be willing to do that. Send me some ideas what you might have for that. Send me an email. So, but the Great Resignation. Part of it is, Phil, right? I mean, in March of 2020, or at least in the United States, everybody woke up and you were either essential or non-essential. And from that day forward, like all of us will carry that tag, all of us. And now some of us are actually unessential, right? Like we're being told that. But if you, right, if you're a hospital employee, you weren't vaccinated and you were fired, you're unessential. But this whole thing of essential versus non-essential, you wrote about it in the book, have a chapter right up front, a detailed one, and said, people overlook how that even happened, right? And then how deep that divide is. Like people will make decisions for generations going forward on their careers, like because they don't want to be in a position where they could be deemed non-essential, right? And be told, hey, like you're opening a restaurant or you're opening, a small engines place, the government can deem you non-essential and you'd have to shut down. So, and maybe there's not going to be some stimulus or PPE this time to help you out. So, and just like psychologically, it is so damaging to do that just overnight to people. And all this stuff coming out of the White House lately, by the way, I don't know, post if you've had this or post down below or post in the threads, but Jennifer Psaki a week ago, as the U.S. Has tensions with Ukraine, we have record high suicides for veterans who had served in Afghanistan, because of the crazy pullout there and the sense of not having what you've done validated. Just compounding everything, supply chains, and then she comes out and says people need to chill and get a margarita and go and do kickboxing and whatever. Like, right? I'm like, who in the hell says that? Like, who has ever said that through history? And how disconnected can you be from people and just what is happening around you? And this is where, like, obviously, I'm sure there are many politicians who didn't believe what they were saying, but they said the right thing for the position, right? They kept up the decorum of the position. And not where before Christmas we get this thing from the White House saying if you're unvaccinated, you're going to have a long and horrible death and people are going to all the stuff around you. And I'm like, who would do that? as a leader. Like, that would not be FDR. It would not be Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, uh, it's appalling. It's absolutely appalling. Um, so let's keep going here. Jim said they caused it by requiring ultra low emission semi tractors. They aren't building yet. Welcome back from the land of yeah. You're right, buddy. I mean, when we got our vehicle in last month, there was a reason why I wanted to buy now, and the reason was I don't trust this administration to I who knows? I mean, maybe there's going to be some decree coming out after this whole thing with Buttigieg and our safe roads. And by the way, everything's got to be EV in 3 years or whatever. You might say, oh, that'll never happen and things like this. But I mean, I think there are a lot of this will never happen things which are off the table now because we don't follow the rule of law. And when I teach my university classes, I address the rule of law and have a number of students who will raise their hand and they'll say, we don't do it that way in our district anymore because what? Or I go to one of my students several of my students contacted me and said, we're looking for the specific data on our Department of Education website in the state, which I had linked out. And it basically has to do with your child count, how many students are in your district and stuff like that. When I couldn't find it. And I'm like, well, I can't find this. I spent like an hour. And I'm like, this website is just crazy, the state one, by the way. But I said, the data's gone. They took it down. Maybe it's somewhere, but I mean, it should be easy to find. So, this stuff is just, it's just crazy, crazy, crazy. I'd love to come on. Carl, love to be a guest on The Great Resignation. Is that it? If so, send me an email. So, Bull Rush. Morning, folks. Morning, Doc. Hey, Bull Rush. Hope everything's well there in Texas. It's -5 here this morning. So, hope it was a little warmer by you. DJ Play Nice. I need a relay, gift of a guitar from Omaha to Western PA. So we need somebody to do that for our good friend DJ Play Nice. Jim McIntosh. If nothing else, they could stuff big block gasoline engines in old rigs for the time being. No kidding. Guys, remember under the Obama administration, cash for clunkers. And all of these, I mean, there were many vehicles which were very functional, right? And they just got destroyed. I remember being up in Superior. We were vacationing in Superior. There was a car dealership, and they had a couple dumpsters in front, and they had cars inside of them as this, visual gimmick, right? To come here with your. And I just remember thinking about that, saying, "This is really wrong." Right? There was a time GM went, bankrupt in 2008, and they're trying to spur sales. But I'm like, there were so many people coerced into getting rid of functioning vehicles, for this. Just, oh God. So, I don't know. I have a doctor's appointment routine coming up in a few weeks, and I know she's going to say, "You're heavier and your blood pressure is up." I'll say, "Yeah, it's winter and I don't like what's going on here in the government. So just leave me alone. I'm okay." Kind of cranky old man. We have a cat, the 3 cats. The one cat's just like me. It's kind of just angry at the world. Good guy. It's not going to bite you or anything, but just kind of goes around hissing at things, hissing at furniture, just angry. Deer in the backyard. He's just sitting there in the porch window, just like hissing at them. And yeah, I get it. It's kind of funny. Safety doc, look up Waymo's self-driving truck. I will. Got it. I've seen a couple documentaries recently on self-driving vehicles. So I think, so Tara, so going back, Pete and his whole thing with like, oh, we have to drop deaths and things. I do think self-driving vehicles will have their place, right? And imagine, if you're elderly or you're, tired or just these others, I mean, I think it's kind of like that Will Smith iRobot, that was almost 20 years ago. You'll be able to control the vehicle to some extent and still have it, but at times you could just like a very advanced modern Tesla or whatever. But I don't think that's a bad thing. necessarily, but it's this whole thing of like, we need to have kill switches, or we need to limit where vehicles can go. And you basically would need a subscription to your vehicle. So I was like, whoa, well, it gets a little different. Carl, in my locale, they brined the roads 2 days ago, but trash is picked up late. Yeah. I took my newer vehicle to get washed yesterday. I put across 1,000 miles. So, and so I first go out and I have this process where I kind of pre-wash it here. Like I get some of the stuff off. I take a bucket of warm water up and loosen some of the stuff up. And there were 14 people ahead of me in line at the car. And there's like 2 places to get the car washed. So there's like a left and a right. And this dude like weaved past me, this old guy, to get ahead of me. And I'm looking at him like, what the hell are you doing? And there was someone then who couldn't get their credit card to work in the machine, and they were like getting yelled at by other drivers, and there was a lot of tension. Like so I got out of there, but I really hate that with Wisconsin, because in summer I spend a lot of time detailing my vehicles. I just love it. I mean, I've done it since I've been, 12 years old with my parents' vehicles, and it's just, to me, like there's such a start and end and completion, and being out in the sun and 80-degree day and stuff like that. It's so rewarding, and then seeing the vehicle kind of shiny at the end. So but now it's just periodically got to knock the brine and the salt off of it. This is from Wiz Learning. They do not keep it though. Minute about needed workers. Next, it's about which workforce gives them more votes. Zippy's figured the code out here, buddy. Wiz Learning. So Zippy, well, yeah, it's the same with these mask mandates. Nobody has been consistent about policies around it. Wiz, you're right on. Right on. And how do we get, Wiz Learning, how do we get from suddenly now this whole thing of N95, everybody needs N95. We're going to have 400 million N95s. I'm like, it's almost 2 months after the pandemic started, and now you're coming out with this N95 stuff where, back a year ago, you could wear a bandana, which a lot of people did, or on Etsy, they had over 1 million masks. I wrote about this in my book. There was no efficacy on inter-rater reliability on masks. Like my mask versus your mask versus somebody else, like they all had different qualities to them. And some people, these homemade masks were all over TV in March and April, TV stations covering them. So, and again, 400 N95 masks, and they have to be able to fit kids, stuff like that. What is that really for a supply? Because an N95, I read multiple journals, maybe 2 days of use before you should replace it. It's not washable. So what does that get you? A week of supply? And then how are you disposing of these things? But see, what you got, it was learning, like that's from phase validity, right? What you're practicing right now is phase validity. You're saying, hey, like I went to the store and I saw like, person with a bandana, a person with a coffee filter as a mask, something of a cloth, something that was just like sports logo. And so it's like, where's the consistency? If you took all of these and had some measurement on them, how do they prevent aerosols from exiting or entering? And then, when people, I always see this, they grab the mask where they're breathing in and out, and then they pull it down. Wouldn't you then immediately contaminate your fingers, right? By doing that? I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this, right? Just wear the mask. Anything? DJ Plainus, another aspect of the cash for clunkers was that all the parts because they're being crushed were not recyclable. That's a good point too. It was, looking back, oh my God, that is just such a mistake to do that. The way that it was done, or maybe that you could have something with cars at a certain age or certain whatever, where then there could be some credit. But I mean, the number of functioning vehicles that could have been maintained that were taken off the roads for this whole initiative of buy new. Oh God, it's sickening. Grumpy cats are the best. Yeah, he's a grumpy guy. He's a good guy though. He comes down here. Sometimes he'll sleep right in back of me on this chair, and I guess it doesn't bite or anything like that. But again, it's just we've got the same kind of personality, but he hangs out at night down here when I'm working on stuff. He's good to when people show up at the house, he kind of takes off. He doesn't interact with people. Interacts with our family, but people show up, he's like, I'm out of here. DJ Play Nice. I also remember that there was a huge push for massive pre-approved financing from several different car manufacturers that were targeting low-income people. Yep. Yeah, I remember that too. Pre-approved, 72 months, 84 months, all of that. So you're right. Yeah, just preying on people to get them in debt. Yeah, you're right. So from face validity, right, get people in debt, make them more dependent. Masks are a fashion accessory now. They're only 17.5% effective. So Jim, yeah, and I wrote about that in Velocity of Information, which I keep wanting to grab a book and show you, but I don't have it. It comes out April 11th. Yeah, the Etsy has over 1 million masks, or at least they did when I wrote about it in the book. And they did have a statement on Etsy where it said, none of our sellers can say that these are medical grade. So, thumbs up to Etsy on that. But so, of course, they're saying, oh, here's a mask, but people wear it over N95. Well, no one is doing that. So, yeah, it was these fashion, like some of them had holes punched in them for jewels and things like that. It's just crazy. And, you saw this right in Congress, too. People just the mask became fashion accessories to match their outfits. So, the weird thing was I went and I asked environmental companies, I said, could you test the efficacy of a mask? What? And then, could you do this? And they said, yeah, of course we could do that. No problem. I mean, because they already do it, like, 3M and the stuff, they do all of this for their mask and paint fumes and, all the different things. So I'm like, then we should have a certain standard of mask that comes out, right? And it should be marked, and it should have some or we should have some like this has this level versus I mean, none of that's out there. It's just so weird. DJ Play Nice. China needs the metal, not the parts. Yep. Total predatory. A friend was doing 10 to 15 repos a week. I went, oh my God, DJ Play Nice. That sucks, man. DJ and like 0% domestically produced mask. Yeah, I just bought a 3-pack of mask, and they were N95s. They were all made in China from a big box store. So, just nuts. Was learning. I have friends who are just conditioned to wear the mask now 24/7 as poggers. Yeah, and I kind of missed out on that when I wrote my book. Because the thing with writing a book, especially a nonfiction book, is you have to end it at some point. So basically the book kind of ended in maybe March or April of 2021, and then it started to go into production. At that point, you can't add things to the book. And I did not see at that time, I thought people, because that's when the CDC came out, and it was a day, it was like March 13th or something, 2021, or May 13th. I think that was basically when I kind of ended things and said the CDC was saying they weren't going to enforce mask mandates and all that stuff anymore. Or give them out. So I thought, yeah, it's pretty much over. Like, you're not going to see it. There'll be a few people who will hang on to it as a personal thing. But then we went back and forth. We whipsawed back and forth on this. And now some people are just like terrified. I interviewed a doctor who in my book. And he said he will likely always wear a mask now, like just psychologically it makes him feel safer, it being in public. So you're going to, anyway, I'm excited about the book is coming out. Yeah, April 11th. So we got just over 2 months. Last night, the audiobook is also in development. And last night we finalized the artwork for the audiobook, because the artwork cannot be the same as the published cover of Velocity of Information. It can't be the same, the way that my contract was written. So there's a similar cover. So visually, if you look at it, like, you'd recognize it and all be grouped together on Amazon and places that sell my books. But because it's through a different distributor that's outside of the publisher, it had to be a different image, because the publisher paid for the graphic artwork on my book, right? So because I wrote it under a contract, so I cannot use that graphic artwork on the audio book. which I have all rights to. So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, the cover or the cover art, the image for the audiobook was finalized last night by someone who was working with me on that. It's awesome. It looks very similar. So if you look at it, but it's different enough where there's not going to be any copyright issues. And plus, like, I have copyright to the image and stuff like that. So everything's all good. But it's kind of exciting going through that stuff. And so I've been going through, by the way, so the book is 208 pages long. School of Errors was 204, 208. And I've been working with a narrator and to prep a document for narrating a manuscript. So he went through it first and then said, okay, I got a feel for this and kind of like what the time would be and things like that. And again, he's also an actor. This is like professional. He does a few of these things a year. So so now I've been going through and I'm about halfway done and I have to find words, things and say like, this is how this sounds. Like it's somebody's last name, like Nikolai Razavayu. Like you never would get Razavayu from the way it's spelled. And then also like, okay, narrate this figure, like, but don't narrate these. Like if it's just a picture, like don't narrate this, or cut this out, or don't narrate notes, or like, here's one where we do, because it's a block quote, we do need to put in according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics or whatever. So like put these notes. But I never knew I had to do that, right? So it's this whole process of learning how you prep a final published or final document for the narrator. But anyway, I'm looking forward to that. That's really cool. So let's do an update here on how things are going here for the stock market. And it's ouchy right today. So 3M stock is down $8 a share. It is now at a 2-year low. Ouch. So, all right. We just did our Tennessee Star. Waltzing on the Tennessee Star. Oh, no, we didn't. So let's do this. Let's cook through these. Okay, this is from our good friends at the Tennessee Star. Now, as you look, the Tennessee Star, they probably copied the Georgia Star here with their logo. I don't know what the hell's going on here with the Tennessee Star. So you can obviously tell it's kind of the same thing. But Tennessee Star. Let's look at the title for face validity. Tennessee officials release new COVID school performance data predating COVID-19. Okay, so there's nothing. Tennessee officials release new project data, performance data. What? I mean, that's kind of a weird headline, but predating COVID-19. Okay, so nothing significant there, except why? So why forensically? Why? What's the purpose of releasing data that is going to be at least from 3 years ago? Because you just had a black swan event, right? We've just had a pandemic, the black swan. So to say it's like we've released car information, we've released supply chain information or whatever, or restaurant information, it's so this is a setup headline from Face Validity. The reason, so there's some purpose they're doing this, right? There's something they want from you when they do this, and we'll find out. Because there's no reason to focus on, you have enough things to focus on now and going forward, and everybody knows that the pandemic threw things off. So what are we going to find here? This is by our good buddy Chris Butler, January 26, 2022. So kids are using colored pencils here on their assignment. That is interesting. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee and staff at the Tennessee Department of Education this week released project data that predates COVID-19 and compared it to students' actual TCAP scores. So thanks, by the way, for saying exactly what. Thanks for using the abbreviation in the first sentence before you've described what TCAP scores are. So something proficiency, Tennessee, CA, children, I don't know, adolescent, who knows. They said in a press release, right? I went through all that. They tried to measure the pandemic's impact on student achievement in the Tennessee Value Added System. Jesus, like how many of these initials and systems can you have? Public websites. State officials use the site annually to measure students' overall growth. At the district level, Union City, Obion Schools, Bradford Specialists, Huntington, Clinton, Decatur, Maryville had positive growth on TCAP math assessments across grades compared to projected pre-pandemic. Holy Lord. All right. In September 2020, Tennessee was the first state to release learning loss projections to begin critical conversations on how to mitigate the efforts. Yeah, that's not accurate. Here's the deal. What else was happening in September of 2020? States were getting their CARES Act or their ESSA money for schools. Some schools used it to build new football stadiums, one in my conference. But they were supposed to have discussions on how to mitigate the effects of pandemic stuff. So as you go through this article, right? This is so what they're trying to do, what they're trying to do here is they're trying to say, hey, like, had we not had the pandemic, our students would have likely made gains, right? And the pandemic threw this wrench into it. And so it's kind of like, we're not accountable. We're not responsible for that. So there's this dip, and the dip is due to the pandemic, which is stating the obvious. So let me go to my notes on this. So one is you never look at 1 year in isolation. You look at a number of years because, right, if you look at, the year 2020 in isolation, it's going to look much different than 2018 through, or 2012 through 2018, 2023 to 2028 or something. But this is called regression to the mean. You never look at 1 year in isolation. You look at it as a group of years, like over a 10-year span. So something happened here. Oh my goodness, things really dipped down, or, well, they dipped down. It's a black swan as a pandemic, right? So that. You don't have to go in and basically say, yeah, our scores dropped and because of the pandemic. By the way, like per our math people here at our Department of Ed, had we not had the pandemic, we probably would have continued making gains. Well, like, no baloney, Sherlock, right? Like, it's a cop-out. It's just saying we're not responsible for kids not making gains. It was all the pandemic's the low key. Remember, LOKI, you blame the low key. But here's what they did then. Okay, I want to take you a step further on this. So remember the headline is basically to say, yeah, we studied this. Let's, Tennessee officials release new project school performance data predating COVID-19. You're like, okay, why would you do that though? Why would I release a study on, school? We just released a school study on attendance in the year 1988. But so some questions come up in this article. How do we close the gap? So the question is, when they release this, they want more funding. That's it. They want more funding. So they're saying, if you give us more dollars, we'll be able to put programs, more services. We can close the gap. The other thing is, you don't know what this will look like 5 years from now. They're saying these kids are ruined and all this stuff. I don't know. I mean, the kids might very well in 5 years rebound and kind of come back to where they would have been at. I don't think no learning has occurred during this time, different learning, or even like different life learning and things like that. But basically they're saying, oh, we got to do something right now to catch these kids up. So here's something. Minnesota did this coming into the school year, and this was a big mistake. So they put all this money aside and said, listen, we have to catch kids up. So you have to teach this in addition to this. So imagine you have a 5th grade student and they miss part of 4th grade or whatever. So they're coming in and saying, we're going to teach 4th and 5th grade at the same time. And, we're going to double up on these curriculums, or we're going to cut out recesses, or we're going to make school longer, or you can log in on nights or on Saturdays. The deal is time is finite. You can't do that. That doesn't work. You can't double up. It's also this thing called supplanting. It's big in education. I don't know how the hell people miss this. Like, I've been doing this for almost, 30 years now. How do you miss out on this? You can't just say we're going to double up on things, because you're going to be kicking things out that you would normally be teaching. So the example is, okay, we're going to teach more reading, but to do that, because we only have so many hours in a day, we're going to teach less math, or we're going to teach less geography. We're going to supplant that. We're going to boot that out of here. So you can't, the way Minnesota did this too was nuts. It was nuts of saying, we're just, this one was Tennessee, but they're basically saying the same thing. Give us more money. We'll offer more programs. We'll catch kids up, because normally the trend, it's not our fault that they, aren't performing right. Our move to remote learning or whatever, which I guess I'm not being super critical on. I'm just saying, you've got to realize you can't double up on things here. It's a finite amount of time that you have. Kids are only going to tolerate so much in families, and try to do these double instructions. You're going to water things down to the point where it's all going to fall apart. What you have to do really is like get super honed in. You have to be like, we are going to do these things. We're going to cut these other things out. We're going to focus on, like, boom, reading and math right now. And then maybe a year or two will shift from that. Kids and parents do not want more schoolwork, right? If you come out with this program saying, hey, we have to catch up, so now everybody has 2 hours at night and we want you to log in on Saturday mornings, and no, it's just stupid. That's where they're going. But why are they going that way too? They get more money. We get more funding this way. So this article to me screams, don't hold us accountable. Right away when you're saying, here's the data, again, predating COVID, and then, we projected out, and it looks like our students would have made their gains had we not had COVID. So, and again, like, who's really arguing that with you? I mean, in a black swan COVID environment, who is coming out and really blaming you that the kids apparently aren't performing well? Plus, like, a lot of these tests are garbage, but these standardized tests. So you're getting defensive, because the states get real punitive with the schools. If the schools and their report cards, right, you're not doing as well with the kids, and the schools are kind of like, well, come on, states, you're sucking pretty bad, your Department of Education. So, like, hold a mirror to yourself before you start criticizing us. So anyway, I just think this is another one of those articles saying, we're not responsible. The pandemic's the low key. Give us more money. We'll double up the instruction on kids. And I'm like, none of this will work. Face validity, right? None of it'll work. So, and again, it's one of those state the obvious things. As Mayor Pete did, state the obvious. Eddie deaths from car crashes are unacceptable. Yeah, I don't argue against that. Right? Like, no one argues that those horrible, but we can work to try to mitigate these things. But I actually feel really good today. So must be you guys. You guys are rocking it. And we have one more article, but oh, God's sakes, no. But first, let's go back to the chat here. Wiz learning, human laziness always wins in the end. It seems to be winning right now. The thing is, too, Wiz learning, I think human laziness has been there, but we also had human laziness and decorum. So we didn't have a Jen Psaki standing at a podium telling people, go get a margarita and do some kickboxing to chill out. We had a decorum. So maybe people were late. I worked with a lot of people who were very lazy, and people didn't think they were lazy, but they knew they dressed well. They presented themselves well. They knew what to say. But at the end of the day, when you're boiling things down, it's like, what did you really do? But now you have people who don't even do that, who aren't even pretending to put up game, right? Zippy wrote, governance was always a business, but good God, it's more of a business these days. Yeah, no, you're right. And again, and it's lost the shellac is worn off of it, right? For example, so if I am elected to the government position I'm running for, right? I would wear dress pants, dress shirt, and a sport coat, dress shoes, like for all of the formal meetings. Like I would do that because I believe there is a way to present and to convey. And, there are people that just don't do that now. Like we even see people in Congress, who are just, oh, it's jeans and, these other things. And I'm like, there's a certain level of decorum that needs to be maintained. And even like Larry Lawton, when I interviewed Larry Lawton, America's biggest ex-jewel thief, but ex-jewel thief now. Good guy. You're like, good guy is jewel thief. No, Larry's doing great things right now. But one of the things Larry was sharing with me is like, Dave, even in like these max security prisons of, where there's murders happening almost daily, said you always had, you used please, thank you, could be somebody who's in prison for life for murder, right? There was always this baseline of decorum that was there. And like he said, things that we had in prison for decorum aren't present in society. I said that just recently, and I'm like, holy smokes. People, this is from John Rice. People find scale different to grasp in the extreme micro and macro. That's really good, John. Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about it that way. My good buddy Armitage. Hey, Armitage, good morning. Saw you last night in a couple chats. So, yes, CRS firearms. Holy smokes. Not getting into that too much here because it's been covered other places, and I don't know any more than what's out there. But he lives just 20 minutes from me and was a guest on my show. Is it my cell phone? He actually helped me understand Google or YouTube analytics and things of that nature. But there's just incredible last 24 hours involving his life and federal agencies. So, wow. Zippy wrote to his learning, that's why utopias fail and government corrupts and devours them. The further they get away from the individual liberty, the U.S. has become Rome. Only the barbarians are politicians. Yeah. And I think, Zippy, from face validity again, when we see the government officials in DC, the government officials, and say, if your car is there's drive in the middle lanes because it's harder for people to carjack your cars. And as I said, there's going to be an industry that will spark up soon, and it will be they'll deliver fuel to your car, and it'll either be at your house or it's some secured area. It's not going to be at a gas station because of the number of carjacking. So there will be this industry, right? Which is crazy. But then politicians, the whole, I would put it in the book, actually, if I was writing the book today, like the White House statement of like, you will have for messaging, because I studied messaging so much in the book, over the last 100 years during civil unrest campaigns. Like no one would put a message from a government in there saying it'll be a long and painful and dreadful and horrible pain. You'll have illness and people around you will die. Winter, like you would never say that. Even if, for example, you believed it was authentic, that messaging was never out. You never heard Winston Churchill saying that during World War II, or FDR in his fireside chats. It's just it's disrespectful. It's immature. It's barbaric. But these are also people who control significant aspects of our lives. So it's not all, we can't dismiss it. But yeah, when I saw or watched Saki do the whole margarita thing, and I'm thinking in this whole context of like, you should be very humbled in that position. You should be objective, and I guess you can be competent, but be humbled. I mean, how many service men and women were affected by Afghanistan, right, who had served there, had been injured, or knew people who were killed, or families who had people killed there, and then now we're another possible conflict starting up with Russia, and people with essential, non-essential, and being able to get supplies or not, or their store. I mean, and you come off of this, go get a margarita and do some kickboxing. More than appalling. This is from Wiz Learning. Safe Talk. What do you think about collecting 95% copper coins before 81 as an investment? So, interesting. It's a tangible asset, right? I mean, that's always the argument with precious metals. Is it's tangible. My question on precious metals would be, if things, if things collapsed, right? How would you use it for a currency? I think right after World War II, precious metals took a while to rebound, just for the fact that people wouldn't accept them at that time, because they didn't have, for example, currency to trade out for them. So again, I guess I have to say not financial advice, but I think that's all good if you can secure it and things like, but like, would you put it in a safety deposit box? Probably not, because I mean, your bank could close and you couldn't get that, or, so it might be one of these long game things where once things started to stabilize out, anything that you have that's as an asset would be worth more. But yeah, I'm getting so, now we had we're a week or two removed out from the government coming out and saying, oh, we're studying the digital dollar. Well, there were, I don't know, you guys probably don't remember this. I don't remember it either. I'm not that old, but it was in the 30s. You had the gold certificate dollars and stuff like that, and you had to turn them in at a certain point to the government to have them redeemed. And now, if you turn it in, it's worth nothing. It's just, it's novelty paper. So would there be a point where the government would say you can't transact in these precious metals? And you could say, well, I'll still do it. But then what if they say, we learn about it and suddenly, we've frozen your home as an asset, or we've frozen your bank account? I don't know. I mean, but then you're really, how do you work around this? Like, where are your things? Like, was it yesterday the feds were coming out and saying they're considering regulating crypto, and Russia regulate? It's like anything we try to do, right? You can buy land, but then what happens with land? Well, the government inflates the value of your land, so you take land as an investment. And our home has gone sky high with value. We were called yesterday. I was called by a realtor who was telling me how much our home had appreciated in our neighborhood, and what they would be willing to buy outright, or if they, we wanted to put it on the market, which I'm not. But that is, but then they just tax you, right? So they'll be like, here, here's your 80 acres out in, some wooded area that you use for, hunting. And now we've increased it so much, so just pay your, whatever taxes on it, which is basically this, inflation type thing. And so I don't know. I think whatever you do for you is good. I think tangible stuff is always of value. Having a house paid off, having, as you said, things that you can actually hold that have value. The thing is really crazy, like all these NFTs that are selling, and like, I'm like, how does that maintain value? I mean, how is that just not, like, oh, my collection of NFTs will be worth money. I don't understand it. But this is from DJ Plainus. Used to occasionally see silver certificates into the 80s. So Yeah, I think it was what 1970 or 71. The U.S. went off the gold reserve, meaning that at Fort Knox, generally we had gold that would match the amount of money we had in the system. So now, once you have what $7 trillion or something, you don't have that backed by gold anymore. There was always this myth too, that there wasn't really that much gold or anything in Fort Knox, which is kind of an illusion, but who knows? But yeah, man, I don't know. Didn't we cover on this show a few weeks ago where like rare Lego collections were a good investment, like have been proven to appreciate and maintain their value and stuff. But I don't know. So NFT is so ephemeral. Yeah, this amazes me, right? It amazes me to see people that would be in the traditional workforce, and they're like, I'm a professional NFTer right now, or people who, and this is an issue. As a university professor, I've read in memos and stuff from universities and things where they're like, how with counselors, and counselors are being approached by both high school and the universities of people saying, well, I could go into nursing, or I could do this, or right now I could go on to OnlyFans and possibly make 10 times that. Which, if you're a counselor, then how do you argue? What's your counter on that, right? Or somebody saying, I'm going to be a professional gamer, and we know that esports, like the university I teach at now, this fall will have a professional esports league, not professional, but a college esports league and scholarships and stuff. But so we're replacing these kind of authentic jobs, right? Of being a nurse, being a welder, builder, accountant, things like that, with these entertainment jobs, which don't really move an economy. It's kind of scary. So this is Brian Bowden. I highly suggest you purchase hold land and physical silver. So yeah, land. Who was it? I forget the land baron in New York. John Jacob Astor. So one of the famous quotes of John Jacob Astor, he said, the only mistake I made in New York is I didn't buy enough land back when it was readily available and he had the resources to do it. Yep. Yeah, land and and property and buildings and rentals, as long as, again, you don't get caught up in some rent, government saying, oh, you can't evict people, right? And there's this rental holiday. So then if you're a landlord, then you're kind of cooked. So how do you work? How do you try to work around that? So, but yeah, I think Brian's right on. I mean, land's finite. So Phil Henry, working is not worth it anymore for many people. I see that every day. I think that's the great resignation right there too. Is like people don't see it. And one of the things I've still got one more article to go through here, but one of the things personally is some of the jobs I worked were really bad. I mean, as far as like the people you worked with, the job itself was very negative. That was a great jobs. Unfortunately, I left like the best job I ever had because I thought I was going into this utopian green pasture, which was not that way at all. And they begged me not to leave when I left, which kind of like, that was a mistake on my part. But yeah, I mean, I'm like, that was just bad. It was and it could have been better. But it was bad. Then again, and as you say, like, Phil, the thing is, and people don't, in my perception, want to start out and work their way up. I started out, and I guess a lot of us could say this, right? And you could share. I started out mowing lawns when I was a teenager, and I had my little lawn mowing business, and like $3 an hour, or like so much a yard, like some of that $5 for somebody's yard, I'd mow it and trim it, and then I had my own mower. I was paying gas, and this is an old time, right? But eventually worked my way up, and did that also in the medical sector I worked in, and in education, and eventually into administration, higher tiers of administration, university stuff, right? I've been teaching 20 years at the university. Started out with undergraduate classes and some courses I built, and now I'm teaching 700 legal classes. But you put in your time and you work and you learn and you move up. And people now want to come in right at the top. And not that I'm at the top, right? But I'm saying like they want to come in and kind of like do some of these things right off the bat. And it's like you can't. I mean, it just doesn't work. Well, it shouldn't work that way. And they also like, I got better because I understood the organization at different levels as I was moving up through it, right? But that's almost seen as not an option or failure today. Oh, if you're coming in and starting at this, or you're doing this, and so I don't know. I get really, it really is bothersome to see how society has gotten that way, especially the younger generation. So I don't, man, I just don't know where the general work. I don't know, if it's work ethic or if it's, on the other side, I go back, I was probably grossly underpaid at, some of definitely retail job that I had through college at a big box store, kind of a home improvement place, right? I was grossly underpaid for that. And that, it's physical labor, too. And, but so this is from Wiz Learning. Hey, Phil, this scares the hell out of me. 99% of society is screwed if people decide to stop working. Right. I mean, that's the thing. We're at this weird point, and I write about it in the Velocity of Information. Let's just think of this in general. So we had 1980, we had warehouses for goods. Things were made, put in a warehouse, eventually like sold out of the warehouse. Then 90s to 2000s, we had just-in-time manufacturing. So like for the book business, you would order a book from the manufacturer, they'd punch it in, and it would automatically be printed and sent to you. There weren't books that they were pulling off of a pallet, right? They would print on demand. So just-in-time manufacturing for vehicles, for a lot of things, which meant you didn't have extra product, a lot of extra product. You had product in certain places you could move around, but not a lot of extra product. So it became more efficient. You weren't warehousing. You didn't have a lot of old product to sell. And then we're moving right now into 3D printing of a lot of things, right? Just think what an Ender 3 can do at home, but just commercial 3D printing where, white papers are seeing places like AutoZone and Napa in a couple, like 3-4 years, will print a number of the parts you come in and ask for. They're not going to be on the shelf to be like, oh, you need a fuel pump for an Isuzu Impreza. Boom, here it is. And it'll print it out and you'll have it. So we're moving. Also, I think people are big corporations and just people in general, like, why should I get into this job when it's probably going to be automated? Or like a bank teller, like out in California, banks that they're basically tellerless. You go in, there's some ATMs. If you want to talk to someone, you press, and there's someone that comes up on a screen, and who God knows where they are. And a lot of these, a number of jobs, I think people are looking and saying, I don't see a long-term career for me in this job, that this is going to be automated. So even like house building and things like that, that the trades and things like that will be there, but some of that will be, you will be the one with a small, maybe 2 other people instead of a big team, and you'll be running the 3D printer that will print the house up, which is already happening. So I think that's a part too for people coming into this is saying, I don't see a long-term for me. It's like when I interviewed Robert Travis, the Alaskan crab boater, and he was talking about, 2003, 2007 being out on the crab boat and just like how wild it was in this adrenaline, but also how dangerous. All 4 of my bosses were dead. It's one of the chapter headings in my book. We're talking, and he said, as crazy as it was, and he said, it's traumatic. Like I still think about it, but there was this thrill with it. But he goes, they're not going to have that in another 5, 10, maybe 10 years. The crab boats, like the deckhands, that'll be automated. Like that'll be robots that'll be doing that, and the processing of the fish below deck. I mean, that'll be automated, especially if any new ships are built that way. So if you're going to be if you're coming out to be a deckhand, first, you're not going to last that long, but like those jobs will be gone. There'll be some people overseeing some of that stuff, but they're probably not going to be out on the deck. So, and I would have to say, other things like, firefighting will change, right? Because like you're probably not far off from having drones that are going to be doing, and other equipment doing some of the firefighting. So you'll kind of be managing it from the truck or just standing away. But I think there's this whole, as you guys have indicated, there's this whole like agency and purpose. And I think when people are looking into jobs, plus again, when we had this thing where people were deemed essential or non-essential, that cuts deep. And a lot of people will never forget that. Oh, I was essential or non-essential. Or like, oh, I'm essential. Like so I had to keep stocking shelves, or I had to keep driving truck while these other people got deemed non-essential. So sometimes it was almost like a badge that people wore, or other times it was offloading a risk onto people. So that is bad stuff. I was learning this system only functions so long as the supply chain continues. If any piece of the system grinds to a halt, game over. Yeah. When I wrote about the supply chain in my book, I wrote about it from April of 2020 when Tyson was coming out and saying the supply chain is breaking, stuff like that. And when I wrote about it at that time in the book, you have to realize that it's 2020. When Tyson did that, when I wrote in the book, I said Tyson did that because the government was, doing these big stimulus funds for corporations, and Tyson wanted a big cut of that. So I didn't believe in 2020 that the supply chain from Tyson was going to collapse as dire as what they wrote. And, I think that was hyperbole. Now, right, to come back and someone to say, what do you think about it now? I'd say, now I think it's much more workforce, related, right? We didn't have this rebound in people after the pandemic and people being paid unemployment and to stay home and stuff like that. So I'm like, yeah, now I don't know. And the way inflation is hitting and everything else, I might take a little different look at that now. But Heavy Water wrote, the nurse shortage is real. Literally, college is the bottleneck of this pandemic. The second hurdle is training them to work ICU are true bottlenecks. So nurses through all levels, hospital, home care, nursing home, things like that. So, it's really scary with that. We had a situation here, you guys probably saw it on the national news, where in Wisconsin, 2 hospitals, Theta, and, which is hour and a half, 2 hours for me. They had nurses leave to go to another hospital, Ascension. So this is all on the news, right? This was in the last couple of weeks, and Ascension was going to give them more pay, more benefits, things like that. And Theta went to court and got an injunction to prevent the nurses from going to Ascension. And the argument was, if you go there, we won't have enough staff and we will lose our level 3 status for treatment or whatever. So the judge granted the injunction. So suddenly these people resigned, but then they couldn't work at this other place, but they weren't forced to go back to Theta. And then on Monday, there was another emergency ruling. And then Theta, it was overruled and basically saying, well, Theta, you can't keep these people from working somewhere else if they give, whatever notices and things like that. If you fall underneath your staffing levels for whatever, that's your issue. You've got to address it. Maybe you've got to recruit. And part of it was these people came back to Theta, these nurses, and said, here's what we're getting offered at Ascension. If you match it, we'll stay. Theta's like, no. But yet they hired these attorneys, massive legal fees. So that's crazy. This is Brian Bowden. Brian wrote, landowners have rights that will blow you away. So, yeah, I think land's always been a good investment, as Astor said. DJ Play Nice. I loathe gentrification here. I have a soft spot for old buildings and architecture. So do I. So do I. I live in the second oldest town or city in Wisconsin. And actually, close to me are the two oldest. There's the oldest standing building in Wisconsin, built in 1819. But yeah, and part of it's our city struggles with this because some of the buildings, especially downtown, have been vacant for a while, and the roofs leak. And so the question is, do they tear them down? And they actually tore down some really nice buildings. Oh my God, there was this just beautiful armory. I think they tore down in the 60s. There's photos of it. And so, but the question is, do we tear it down? And then some of the statement is, well, just because it's old doesn't mean it's historic. I get it. So I don't know. Those are tough. Heavy water. College is so inefficient. We can produce medical staff when we need them. Yeah. I mean, you could do like Google kind of does their certifications, right? You could establish something that for nurses, some accelerated program. I mean, if we were truly in, let's say, a wartime condition, you could do this, and we could do this now. Remember, it was a year ago they did allow doctors and nurses in some aspects of their professions to skip their final year of internship and go right to work. But yeah, it's a good point. Zippy the Wiz Learning, need to get big biz and government out of the way of trade, else people will give up. Cost of scale is taking the profit out of work. Yeah, there's Zippy, you're right on. And I read a few articles about that saying America is no longer a place for entrepreneurs, right? I mean, I guess you have like Elon Musk and Mark Cuban and things like that. You have a few of these examples, but generally, you just have the land of managers, right? Of people who are trying to manage others and to regulate others. Like when JD Rockefeller was putting in his pipelines and stuff like that, certainly, right. Environmentally, how good was that? Arguable, right? I mean, some of the stuff probably leaked or had failures, but on the other capitalist side, like they attended to the pipelines very thoroughly because anything that would leak out wasn't being sold, right? So there was an incentive to have these innovate these systems and make them very efficient. But yeah, there are just so many things that you have to go through for regulation. I mean, for me, like to keep my professional licenses as a school administrator, other levels, so many required trainings a year that aren't compensated, paying the different licensure fees, being a member of the different groups. So it's like, Chiefs, NY Outcast. And if you haven't subscribed, do so, buddy. Got 21 people already. So thank you. Yeah, please smash that subscribe button here for your good friend, the doc. It is appreciated. Watching, we're over 2,000 watch hours, so halfway to 4,000, and it's really picking up. So good. And if you have the show on in the background as you're drawing an NFT, go for it. So yeah, I think NFT is crazy. This is NY Outcast. I only count on what I personally secure. Yeah, stuff is crazy. So, and isn't it like artwork? For example, if you invest in artwork has a very high tax level to it. Is it something like 37%? So, I would think the government is going to look at these NFTs and put at least an artwork type tax on it. This stuff is so new. Brian wrote, you can do whatever e-job you want, but always remember your 1099 will always go with you. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I did a lot of consulting last year, so my 1099s are all rolling in. So you don't use banks or credit cards. I get it. So yeah, I don't know if that is directed to me, or I do use banks and credit cards, but yeah. So one of the things that is coming up more is banks that are closing or just saying we're not open today. And I think it's either staffing or something else going on. But yeah, I've noticed that somewhat in my area, but other member checks, especially in California, are saying it's much more prevalent of banks. They're not like going out of business. They're just saying, they're just closed today, or they're closed till next Tuesday or something. And there's a sign on the door. If you need to contact somebody, you call this number or whatever. Driving but listening, had to visit cable company, fix some issues. All right, Vanessa, I have to visit the cable place to get a new remote here sometime. This is from Wiz Learning to Brian. I think this is going to be the only way, some level of financial security going into the future. So yeah, it is, man, it is crazy. So, this is from Zippy to NY Outcast. I was generating about $50 a month after electric bill in crap coin till I sold my card for $400. Wow. So we have one more article. Let's get to it right now. This is from Blaze Media. Michigan State University allows nearly 15,000 basketball fans at sold out games, but shuts down in-person learning in January. Michigan. So Michigan really was aggressive on their not only mask, but not travel. Remember that a year ago? Don't travel to your summer cabin up north. But of course, elected officials did. So here, Michigan State, 15,000 people in the stands, basketball game. By the time you get there, by the time you leave, maybe about 3 hours. So let's take a face validity check at this. Okay, so Michigan State University allows meaning they make this decision. Coffee time. Nearly 15,000 basketball fans at sold out games, but shuts down in-person learning in January. So university is saying, right, you come to these games in person, whatever they do, vaccine, mask, test, whatever. But your classes are online, Michigan State University students. So your face validity here, just from the headline, is interesting. Like, what are you doing for basketball games to make that safe for people to be in a densely populated area? Because, right, all arenas and stadiums are built to be densely populated for cost effectiveness. What are you doing there that you couldn't be doing in person, where maybe you have 20 or 30 students in a room for 60 minutes versus people here yelling, screaming, close proximity for at least maybe 3 hours? So let's get into it here. Michigan State University won't allow for in-person learning until the final day of January, but at the same time had no problem opening the school's arena for nearly 15,000 screaming fans. Let's hope those masks are knocking down all those aerosols, to attend every Spartans home game this month. On December 31st, Michigan State University President Samuel L. Stanley Jr. announced in a letter that the school spring 2022 semester would commence on January 10th virtually, continue to be remote until January 31st. Stanley notes that Michigan suffered a spike of COVID-19 in December, which at a time was an all-time high of 11,000 cases. And then, I don't know, there's read more. So, oh my God. Yikes, get out of here. Crazy person. So, Stanley admits, I realize that students prefer to be in person, and so do I, but it is important that we do so in a safe manner. All right, folks, face validity. What do you think? So, it's Old Humble Distilling Company. Dun, dun, dun. So, yeah, Old Humble is saying to Zippy, if most D1 schools completely shut down their athletics programs, they'd actually make money. Interesting. Is that because there are a number of programs that are sparsely attended and don't have much sponsorship, like media commercials and things like that. So I'm not getting a cut, because I think here in Wisconsin, like football pretty much drives the budget, and then men's basketball is the second. But obviously, yeah, it's Camp Randall and 80,000 people. But so from phase validity with this, right? Phase validity is oh God, please, let's get you off of there. Just from the headline, right? This doesn't make sense. So what the article, what should happen here, right, is I don't need the university president to say, oh, we return when it's safe and all of that, because like obviously then this isn't safe. If this can be safe, the classrooms in campus can be safe, right? You could use whatever you're using here. By the way, this guy doesn't have a mask on, at the side right here. But players aren't wearing masks. I did talk to environmental companies again, and I asked them, could you come out onto the floor at different times during a game and take samples of the air and identify if there was COVID aerosol present? And they said yes. Every one of them said, yeah, we absolutely have that technology. We could do it. I asked, has anybody asked you to do that anywhere? No, they haven't. And it's kind of strange because like in a school setting, not so much this wouldn't be the setting for it, but like schools, they come in and do air samples for mold, but they don't come in and do samples right here. So what if you did a sample right here and you realized, oh my goodness, this is pretty aerosol dense with COVID. Maybe 2 players are passive carriers here. What would you do? Because that would be circulated around the arena and all this stuff. But anyway, we can see there are already, like this person, there are people here who don't, this person has a mask under their chin, stuff like that. So, so the question that comes up here from a face validity standpoint is, if you're going to have an article, the article, well, first of all, face validity, how can you have it this way for the athletes and not for the students? And for the fans, not really the athletes, it's the 15,000 fans who are shoulder to shoulder here for 3 hours, and in all the other places, which are concourse and places that are densely populated. So wouldn't you argue, wouldn't the argument be from the student body, right, of saying, well, like, we'll follow the same things here. I don't know what it was, if it's testing, if it's wearing mask, if it's whatever they put in place, right? Because you're not going to be sitting this close in class, by the way. But we'll put that in place at our university. So you could replicate that, right? You could replicate whatever procedures they were testing before, or a rapid test or vaccine card or whatever it is. You could replicate that. So the people who are attending this game in the student section, like, they could actually be going to classes. So, this is one of those very stark face validity things. It's like the, LA Rams hosting, games at the end of the season when LA was saying, students can't go to school. And they, my friend who's running, for mayor, Kevin Dalton, who wrote an endorsement for my book, and having pictures of saying, like, here's a parking lot outside of school where kids have to socially distance and stay there and be brought in. But then, like, here was the Rams game where, take a picture and half the people don't have masks. And to get in was pretty easy. But so at some point, like, these face validity things are going to fall in on themselves. And the face validity things, if you look at, looking at this picture, maybe really scrutinized it, right? All of the things in here, you'd be like, whoa, like, this doesn't make sense to put this and juxtapose it against, oh, we can't have college students attending classes, but we can do this. So it doesn't make sense. It reminds me of, when I wrote about it in the book, and Brian Bowden was part of the Member Check Network, and Chuck Mack in Pittsburgh and things like that. And we were watching the postal carriers back in March and April, May of 2020. And that's when, heavy messaging, people being told, you have to wear masks, limit your time outside, wash your hands, wear gloves, all these things. And our postal carriers, we would monitor, and as they were coming to the house, right, or delivering mail, for the most part that we observed, they weren't wearing gloves and they weren't wearing masks. And they would go from one place to another without changing gloves, or if they, bare hand, right, with your mail. So it's like, okay, like you just touched this other mailbox, but maybe that person is positive. And now 30 seconds later, you're touching my mailbox to put the mail in and things like that. So we didn't see this, this messaging, right, that we were all told, to do this and to do whatever. But then as you're watching postal carriers drive around in little white trucks, I'm like, wow, or they're not getting out and spraying something down or like using a UV light wand. It was pretty much business as normal. And not just saying that, we objectively measured that as a group and had a large database that came into that, which I wrote about in my book. And of course, like down at the post office, at least in my post office, this was pretty prevalent. And again, member checks, putting up some kind of plexiglass shield, but it wasn't like sealing the whole area. So, so what did that really mean? These, I think right here, these are the type of things that are going to just collapse in on themselves at some point. You're going to have people either, going to concerts, events, indoors, outdoors, heavy populated areas, malls, things like that. And you're going to have these other restrictions put into place. So you can't go to, hospitals with some elective procedures. You can't go to school or, things like this. You'd be like, well, why? I guess, the logical question is be like, well, why can't we learn what they're doing? Why can't we put the money behind however they're making this happen and make it then so we can go to post-secondary or we can go to K-16? Because it seems like it's working here, right? So that's that's really this big disconnect. Let's go back over to Wiz Learning here. So Wiz Learning wrote to Zippy, what does the aristocrat do if every nation is sinking, I wonder? I guess they start over on a private island out in the ocean with all their wealthy buddies. I don't know. Is that what's happening? So, wow, that is. Let's see how our Dow Jones is doing today. It's up 104 after being down big. These big swings are pretty concerning, by the way. I don't remember this. I don't know, in the past. So, and yeah, I don't know. So let's touch base here in the threads. So, what? All right. I don't know. Old Humble Distilling Company said to Zippy, you can only build walls so high to keep the world out before they come with pitchforks and torches. Yep. Zippy to Wiz Learning, giving how investment in big biz goes. You merely do what you used to do, lie and bribe your way through the things. I think what's happening, at least what I'm observing, is things are just getting recalibrated lower expectations. It just seems to be the standard. At least, so many interactions I've had, whether it be from stores I've gone to, banking that I've, gone to, Just the expectations are just, I don't know, just old humble safety doc. You can only act on what you can control and do what you can do. Yeah, right. So that's the thing. Like, if to be aware of things, and with face validity, that's part of Face Validity Friday, is taking things and looking, analyzing the headlines, and then looking beyond the headlines, because 30% of the time, statistically, wrote about it in the Velocity of Information, people will only take the headlines. And if it's real urgent news, they will, it even decreases beyond that, meaning they pass the headlines faster. So the tendency would be to not check or verify the headline. It would be to take the headline and forward it to your social media account and to people you know without vetting it. So at least vetting it gets you out of this whirlpool effect somehow. And then if you can see with your member checks as if things are starting to change in places like shortages and stuff like that, maybe you can ramp up your supplies. And I wrote about that in the Velocity of Information, how our member check network was able to do that pretty well. But yeah, it's your locus of control. Is you can control what you can do, and how you treat other people, and how you manage your own things. It's the weird thing is, Joe, it's like when things get annexed away from you, under your feet, or through inflation, like things get taken from you. So like if you, for example, play by the rules, right? You're a saver or something like that. And then suddenly inflation, is 10, 15, 20%, and your savings maybe 1% on a 5-year CD. Like you're just having that money taken from you. There's, what can you really do? Like put it in the stock market where down 800 in the morning, up 100 in the afternoon. I guess invest in property, other things, but I mean, it is really crazy. And like, yeah, your house value going up, and then suddenly you get this big tax bill and you're like, well, I didn't do anything on the house. And they're like, oh, it doubled in a year, so you're like, well, if you sell it, then you'd have to pay probably the same or similar to get another house. Or what if the house goes down? You've still paid this tax on unrealized gains. So yeah, you're right. And so I think it's understanding that and trying to, I don't know, to live with it, to realize it. I mean, I've known some people who have just kind of freaked out and almost lost it, over this stuff. And I think we've seen that too. People who just, ultimately frustration and withdrawal and anger and things and like that. So at least if you can kind of understand in the micro things that you can control, in-person learning should be implemented. We take precautions. So Vanessa. So yeah, so like the Michigan State University, like that's pretty ridiculous. And as a university instructor for 18 years, I teach in-person in fall, online in spring. Online is more difficult to teach than in person for me, at least flat out. And to try to switch a course from online to in-person or in-person to online midway, which I've done throughout my 18 years, is very, very difficult. It's kind of designed for one way or the other. Like I don't have if I were to like have my class switched now to in-person, which would be weird, like they wouldn't do that. But for example, my fall classes would have been moved to online, I incorporate a lot of case studies that I write, and we go through and debate and things like that. And I wouldn't be able to do that online to get everybody with the same effect, right? To be able to do that. It wouldn't work. I've tried it. Not the same. Joe from Old Humble. Imagine the Walton family collectively moving to China or Russia. I feel how long before China decides the Waltons don't get to have what they have anymore? It's true. Right. That is, I never even thought about that. But yeah, that is, wow. This is Old Humble. Safe Deck. If at any time we're facing 10% inflation, there's going to be bigger problems than basketball arenas with 15% students. Yep. Yeah. Because right. At some point, buying just kind of craters, right? I mean, it absolutely would. So one of the key things people forget, and I did a show on this back in like March 20th or something of 2020. Between maybe like March 10th and March 25th or something, there was a period of time when stock markets were crashing. People were told to stay home, all of this stuff of 2020. And there wasn't this, government stimulus plan that was coming out. So no one knew what was happening. And Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, gas was under $1. Like, at least where I was at, gas plummeted under $1. People were selling anything. I drove by the storage sheds, like on the outside of town, and like a third of them, people, were there, maybe like 100 units, and there'd be like 30, usually there was like one or two people there, if anybody. And they were just like getting out anything, trying to sell stuff. Firewood. I had a friend of mine, Nick Schulander, who was on the show, bought like a gaming computer, a couple $1,000s for me, like $100-200. And the guy drove it and delivered it to him because gas was $1, because he needed the money. Juan is in here. Juan, as the Aztec Patriot. I talked to Juan, and Juan, who's a mechanic in San Francisco. Juan was buying vehicles in March and April of 2020 for $1,000. And he'd say, like the tires and rims are worth this much alone, because people are like, I need the money. This is it. And so they were just selling them. He'd fix them up a little bit, and in time he was able to turn them around. Imagine what they'd be worth now. But it was that desperation was there. So very close to seeing that again. If we have high inflation and people are like, I just need this money for food or fuel or whatever it is. And we're in this weird part too, where I wrote about in my book, like we had comfort, this crowd-in behavior, which is like when you're months into extended chaos, and we're still there. Like people aren't willing to leave that, but you're not going to be able to buy the comfort items or like maintain them anymore. If you have hyperinflation, you're going to have to give those away, which will cause more despair. So actually, like when my book comes out, like there's a lot of stuff. Was there inflation in the 80s? Yeah, early 80s, more like in the 70s. But also at that time, Vanessa, like interest rates were high, and like mortgage rates were high. So I mean, and there wasn't a lot of nearly as much money. Quantitative easing, right, wasn't in place. So things did regulate out at that time. So yeah, inflation peaked at 14.9. So, and had been falling ever since. Yep, you got it. So Wiz Learning, thanks for being here. What we're seeing today is nothing like what it was in the 80s, right? Yeah. Inflation, right? Imagine someone even telling you taking out a home mortgage for 15 or 18%. But that's, if you had money and you put it in a bank CD, you could also get 15 to 18%. Plus the bank would give you things. I remember taking out a bank CD early 80s, and the bank let you pick things. If you took out X number of dollars in a CD, certificate of deposit. First, the return was great. And I picked out a Stanley screwdriver set, a really nice, which I still have today. So they had these bonuses, right? Give you a toaster, give you other things. And because, but now it's not that way. They don't want a lot of money. They can get money very cheaply, just loaning from the Fed. And if everything goes digital, part of the statement in the U.S. 2 weeks ago, the statement coming out about digital currency from the U.S. government is saying it would likely eliminate savings. Interest on savings would likely be gone if we did that. So Vanessa wrote, the way the feds have placed money in the overnight repo markets and their monetary easing policy since 2008 have been the worst. Yeah, it is. I mean, because, right, you can't just keep putting endless dollars into an economy. And as you say, how are you going to hoover, how are you going to suck these dollars out? It just doesn't make it doesn't make sense. It's really scary. Old Humble, decade of the 80s saw fundamental restructuring of our economy to a supply side philosophy that kept driving prices super low. Yeah. Plus efficiencies, right? So we had just in time manufacturing coming in. And like now the 3D printing has high efficiency, like the white papers on that, because, right, you're not cutting away excess product, and you don't have to retool and rejig and things like that. So you will have some of these efficiencies. And we also saw efficiencies in farming. But now with fertilizer going up and other things, like some of these things will be crazy, you know. So, yeah, 7% inflation for December. The inflation standard gas changed dramatically since the 80s definition. Yeah. I've never seen what's happening right now in a short amount of time, and the stock market volatility of going down 1,000 points and ending up 100. These big swings, like, you know. I've been an investor for 30 years, and you know, the .com stuff kind of crashed. It wasn't like this big whipsaw back and forth what we've seen here in the last like maybe 3 weeks. This is very weird, and there's been nothing like it in history to start off a year. So, Old Humble, back in the free toaster days of banks, my wife's grandparents got a grandfather. Wow, that's really cool. So yeah, it's funny. I still have this set of Stanley screwdrivers, and still use every time I use them. I like remember. I know the bank. I know where. I have that in my mind where they were, and they're like, you know, what do you want here? I'm like, I want that. It wasn't a cheap, you know, set of knockoff screwdrivers. I mean, it was a decent set of Stanley screwdrivers. So since the 80s, most every large manufacturer left their shores. Yep. Old Humble, that low inflation, low interest rate environment killed the communist bloc more effectively than military confrontation. Yeah, it's a good point. We buried the commies in money, right? John Rice, a bankroll here, or a bank here will give you a knife set for opening a checking account. Laugh out loud. Wow. Like a switchblade, or what kind of knives are you talking about? Steak knife? No. China and Russia are still communist nations. John Rice saw an ad last year from the bank locally. Okay. And then Old Humble to Vanessa, does your company deliver to Connecticut? Oh, yes. So Old Humble is a business owner. So understands, you know, what is happening in the economy from the impact of how he's able to obtain his supplies and the transport of his goods and all of that. Old Humble is said to Vanessa, China's communist, Russia isn't. It's authoritarian, not communist. Those aren't the same. Okay. All right. So, right here is, we have 22 thumbs up for the show. So if you can do a thumbs up, I appreciate it. If you can post in the comments, because people have been doing that, and I'll respond to your comment and maybe say, hey, like, here's something else I found for Face Validity Friday, or here's something else I found about inflation. Here's something happening by me. Everybody appreciates that. I appreciate that. How to subscribe, that's up above in the pinned tweet. I'm not sure for Monday night exactly what I'm going to do yet for that show. I've got a couple ideas. This is kind of a weird time of year for me because I'm teaching, and because I'm teaching online at the university, there's a lot of time I need to commit to that, different times during the day. So as I said to my wife, I said, it's actually basically like you teach every day for the semester. Because like in fall, you teach on the days you have class, but when you're e-learning, you teach kind of every day. But and plus I'm running for political office, and the election's April 5th. So if, there'll be things with that. And then if I get voted in, there'll be some time I'll be doing that. Working, with the book narrator. So I have to listen at night when the book narrator gets done with parts, and we try to have a 48-hour turnaround and things like that. So I just need to kind of manage my time differently than what I'm doing. So, but anyway, that doesn't mean the show's going away. But I need also just to think about what I'm going to do on Monday night, because I had great guests last Monday, and I think I'll do one without a guest this week because I got a couple things in the hopper. But if you're interested in being a guest, come on, or let me know, and also let me know what we would talk about. And everything needs to kind of be themed into some kind of either school or community safety, or kind of like a mental health safety, agency and purpose safety. So, and it's usually not hard to get there from anything that we're kind of talking about. Let me go one more time in the comments. Here is when you're in Fort Worth, certainly look me up. I'm still 5 hours away from there, but I can steer you to a store. So good deal. And I might be getting down by your area at some point, Old Humble, to visit a friend that you know, and I know that lives in your area. But yeah, and if I get voted on to in this government position, it is going to kind of limit my ability to travel because of the meetings and stuff like that too. But heavy water. I'm a locksmith. If you ever need one to talk. That's interesting. How about this? So heavy water. Would you email me? And here I'll put it, because you can find this in my hopefully on my page here, but it is the safetydoc@gmail.com. If you would just email me and say, hey, like, I'm heavy water and I'm a locksmith, then yeah, let's have a talk on that, because I think that would be interesting. Talk about what the whole thing of like how people try to secure their properties, and I like that. I watched that one Lockpicking Lawyer quite a bit. This is from Old Humble. Communist systems are often authoritarian, but authoritarian is not communist. They're usually kleptocratic, free-ish markets, but there are very few true communist markets nowadays. So, Joe, you know this better than I do. But thanks for and thanks for putting that out there now. And thanks for putting that out there, because you're informing me. I don't know this as well. So I do know where the Ukraine is on a map, because when I wrote extensively about Chernobyl and interviewed Nikolai, we were kind of working off of maps and pointing out different things. John Rice, I'd love to get into that career, but it's hard around here to get into the trade. So, and Gloria Miller. Gloria, that is a terrific photo, by the way. So if that is you, that is a really nice photo. I know some people just kind of use photos to protect their identities or avatars or something, but that's a very nice photo. Communism doesn't work because people like to own stuff. Frank Zappa. No kidding. Yeah. So, wow. All right. Well, everybody, by the way, I'm Cody Slocum of Swamp Dog Armory made an intermission video that's about 100 seconds long, and he is gifting it to me. Like, he makes these things, and I'm going to hopefully have it Monday night. So he showed it to me a couple nights ago, and he's like, here it is. What do you think about it? I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so much fun, right? Just kind of on those Monday night shows, I like to take a break, in the middle for just a short bit. And that is just really, it's going to be really fun. So he emailed me and said, I almost have it done. Like, he's tweaking some things out on it, but it's really cool of him to do that. Like, just here, I want to gift this to your show, and things like that. So, like, oh, dude, I appreciate that, man. Really do. So, well, I've lost my ability to bring snow on the screen here. So, but what I'm going to do is tell everybody very much that, hey, I appreciate all of you. Thanks for being here on Face Validity Friday. I will see you at 8:15 p.m. Central Standard Time for the Safety Doc podcast on Monday night. And I just, again, want to, oh my goodness. And by the way, we have Paula Berlinski to achieve world government is necessary to remove Well, we have a lot of new people here at the end, so we'll come back on Monday night and come back here next Friday. So I actually need to stoke my fireplace or my wood burner because I heat my house with wood, and it was -5 this morning, and the temperature is starting to drop here. So I need to restock. And by the way, I had my huge glove, which is basically a welding glove, as I put the wood in and out, and I left it too close to the fire to the wood burner, and the thing like totally solidified. It just got cooked, which is really crazy. So I have to use a different one. So I have to keep things away because like it just radiates heat. So there has to be this like big circumference around it to keep everything safe. So I'm like, whoa. All right. This is MK Joe saying, hey, thank you, Doc. Have a safe weekend. Everybody there, have a safe weekend. Cheers. Hey, Rob. See ya. And yeah, appreciate it, everybody. Have a great weekend. This is Safety Doc out. Take care, everybody.